But we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nick Miller. I'm the executive director at Trailhead and one of the regular hosts of Survive to Thrive, typically with TM Rostigar from Trailhead. I'm sorry, did I say I'm the executive director at Trailhead? I'm the executive director at the Venture College. I was thinking about TM. And typically, like I said, we're joined by TM. Today we have a guest co-host along with our guests here today. Cody Romero from the Blue Sky Initiative is our guest host today. And I'm going to ask Cody to tell you a little bit more about Blue Sky. But first, for those of you who may not have attended Survive to Thrive in the past, this is an effort put on by the Venture College where I work, not Trailhead, but in partnership with Trailhead, where we've tried to bring folks together ever since, last April, tried to bring folks together in the community, specifically in the startup and small business community, to try to create just that, a sense of community while we're all isolated. And today, we're really excited to talk about diversity, quality, and inclusion, and how our small business owners and startup owners in the community can put their intentions into action. A couple of weeks ago, there was a great discussion with Sharon Connors from Micron, and we heard a lot about best practices and things that you can do within your business. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about things that you can do in your own community to make a difference. So without further ado, I'll ask Cody to tell us a little bit about Blue Sky Institute at Boise State. And then Cody will introduce our first guest, Whitney. And then I'll introduce Kayla, and Cody will introduce Kirsi, and we'll jump right into it.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick, and good afternoon, everyone, and everyone who may be watching on Facebook. As Nick mentioned, I am the program manager for the Blue Sky Institute, and Blue Sky was developed on the founding mission to create cross-disciplinary and cross-sector partnerships that seek to positively impact our community's most entrenched social challenges and catalyze progress in the ecosystems surrounding them. We right now focus our efforts and resources on two complex issues, one of them being diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the other one being around student basic needs. And I'm really happy to be here, so thank you for this invitation. And I'm going to be introducing Whitney Mestelle, who serves on Blue Sky's executive committee and is also the co-founder and executive director of Inclusive Idaho. Whitney is a DEI strategist and the co-founder of Executive Idaho and executive director of Inclusive Idaho, an organization focused on building inclusion and belonging for underrepresented, underserved, and minoritized Idahoans. Her previous work includes professional athletics management, higher education, marketing, ministry, and college athletics coaching. Whitney earned a dual Bachelor of Science from Missouri Southern State University in Mass Communication and Public Relations. She also spent a year in legal education at the University of Idaho School of Law. A former collegiate track and field athlete and NCAA All-American, Whitney has continued her passion for athletics by earning a USATF Level 1 coaching certification and serving as a youth and Bora High School track and field coach. Welcome, Whitney.
Man, that's really, it's a lot of information. Hi, thank you. Thanks, Cody.
Hey, when you've accomplished a lot, it's going to take a minute to list all of those things. Welcome, Whitney.
Thank you.
All right, I have the pleasure of introducing Kayla Groat. Kayla is the College Readiness Coordinator and Education Manager with One Refugee. She's worked with refugees for over 10 years through various leadership, volunteer, and administrative capacities. She developed an early passion for the work during her undergraduate years at Boise State, when her work began as a refugee family mentor and resettlement intern. As a sociology student, her work with international communities was enhanced by a growing awareness of the needs of underprivileged populations. Kayla earned a master's degree in community psychology from Sacred Heart University, which enables her to apply social action research in community settings. As part of her graduate work, she developed the College Bound program in partnership with the International Rescue Committee. Since its inception, College Bound has empowered dozens of high school students from refugee backgrounds to pursue their dreams of a college education. Kayla continues to run College Bound as a new addition to One Refugee's college readiness programming. Under her role as education manager, she's thrilled to also support College Bound graduates and other newly onboarded One Refugee students through their early transition into college. Welcome and thank you for joining us, Kayla.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And last but not least, we have Kirsi Jarvis, who's the careers manager with One Refugee. In her role, she oversees professional development resources for One Refugee college students, including internship partnerships, professional mentorships, resume development, and networking opportunities. Prior to her time with One Refugee, Kirsi worked with Meridian International Center in Washington, D.C. She also worked with Global Talent for a short time to expand outreach efforts in Utah for immigrant and refugee professionals. She has a master's degree in public administration from BYU and enjoys spending time creating, dancing, and traveling the globe in her dreams for now. Welcome, Kirsi.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, excited about our panel today, and really just want to dive into learning about each of you as well as learning about the organizations you represent. So this first question will just be for all of you to answer, and maybe we can jump back to Whitney and then go from there. But the first question is, who or what has inspired you to do the work that you do? Or, speaking more broadly, maybe even your organization. What are some of the inspirations or driving forces behind the work that you choose to do?
That's a really big question, but I think the biggest answer is one, personal experience and personal life. So how I exist in the world is definitely a huge part of why Inclusive Idaho exists. But if you attended the vigil last summer, you know that it was a really large event, and coming off of that event, a group of us, so my sister and Austin and Jesse, together, we just said, like, is this it? So this was a really great thing. It was a really big moment, but what can we create? What can we do that not only talks about racial justice and addresses those things, but brings alongside we can bring with us other minoritized and marginalized communities within our state and with our communities. And what can we create that will do that really, really well? That's more of an organization versus just a single moment in time. And so I think we all know that last summer, the height of so many things between a pandemic and so much marching in the streets and so many conversations, not just around Black lives, but just inequities and racial justice period, really moved us into feeling like we had an opportunity and a duty to create something to bring Idaho along in regards to inclusion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Whitney.
Yeah, go ahead, Cody.
Oh, I was just going to say thanks, Whitney.
Yeah, I definitely can see. I think we'll hear that today throughout today's session of a sense of duty to do the work that you're doing, and and hopefully today we can share that sense of duty, and all of us can hear that same call to get out and support the really important work that you all are doing. Maybe let's go to Kayla next to tell us about what inspired you to do the work. And Kayla, I think your situation is a bit unique because you were a different organization that was absorbed by a new organization. So maybe tell us about what inspired you when you started with the previous organization and then that transition into One Refugee.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I started volunteering with families who were newly arrived as refugees about 10 years ago. I was well, 12 years ago or so now. I was an undergraduate at Boise State, majoring in sociology. So anyone who's taken a sociology class knows that it really exposes you to the inequality going on, especially in the United States. So I heard about the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, and I was really excited to get involved there. So I started volunteering as a family mentor. I worked with a family just brand new to the United States from Myanmar. And then a few years later, got connected with a family from Congo. And the point of the volunteer position was to help these families learn the basics of how to function in the United States. So how to use the bus systems, things that we take for granted, you know, how to weigh your fruit at the grocery store, how to check out a book at the library, and essentially to build friendships and be a support for these families. So I began to get really close, not just with these families, but with their extended families, and began to develop a lot of friendships within the local refugee community. And I would ask them about their experience being new to the United States. And now that you're here, what are your hopes and dreams for the future? And, you know, every once in a while they would say, I want to buy a home. I want to be a mechanic and own a garage someday. But every single one of them said, I want my kids to go to college. And that just really struck me because I had seen these families' lives. I know, you know, it's very likely that they will be working menial jobs for the rest of their lives. But these parents made a huge sacrifice and gave up everything to come here on the hopes that their children would have a better life. So that was really inspiring to me. So I knew I wanted to work with refugees, and I went on to grad school. I chose community psychology because it was a chance to channel sociology into more pragmatic action. And as part of that, my capstone for that degree, I worked with IRC to develop College Bound for these families.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to dig a little bit more into that transition between your previous organization and One Refugee next. But Kirsi, do you want to tell us a little bit about what inspired you and maybe speak more largely to One Refugee, how that organization came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me personally, I grew up in Utah, and then when I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I ended up working in Washington, D.C. for 2 years and implemented international exchange programs for the U.S. State Department and embassies abroad. And while I was doing that, I came in contact with an organization called Upwardly Global, who works in the large cities across the United States to support immigrants and refugees who have a professional background. So anyone who currently had a degree and profession from their home country arrived to the US, was working in a low-paying job and not using their professional skill sets. They provided various professional development means. And so I signed up as a volunteer, truly by like divine happenstance that I even found them. And I remember the first time I sat across from this gentleman from Ethiopia who was an accountant. And I was young professional, just out of college. And I remember being overwhelmed by his amount of experience and all that he was capable of. And I felt like I was just there to let him know that he could do it and that he could fulfill his dreams as much as he wanted to. And so that really instilled a seed in me of wanting to find avenues of professional development within working within individuals from a refugee background. So when I was in Utah, came in contact with One Refugee, and it was a great fit to be able to support our student population. And so really what is inspiring us now is our students. And so One Refugee is a nonprofit, privately funded organization in Utah, and that is also operating in Idaho. And so we have students at 14 different institutes and colleges across Utah and Idaho who are attending college full-time. And everyone in our program is of a refugee background, meaning that they arrived as a refugee themselves to the United States, or they're children of refugee parents. So we do have students who were born in Utah or Idaho, and their parents arrived as refugees before they were born. And so our population right now is almost 300 students, and we have 250 graduates, and across all different majors, all different backgrounds and countries, depending if you are familiar with the resettlement process for refugees in Utah or Idaho, our numbers really match the resettlement that you see. And so really what has inspired us to keep going and keep growing is the individual stories with our students. I remember when I first joined One Refugee, and I was just trying to get a grasp on things and working on resumes and trying to help students with PAR examples and interviews and just trying to bridge those gaps. And I watched one student who was a freshman at Salt Lake Community College, and he was the first in his family to be going to college, didn't have anyone ahead of him who had ever done it. And he wanted to be an engineer. And so he'd been told that as a freshman, he probably couldn't get an internship. And so he was just working kind of his side jobs. And then him and I started connecting and working, and I watched him grow and flourish. And he interviewed and got this great internship with Marriott as an engineer. And it was amazing to watch. And that was kind of my first experience. And so now we watch so many stories like those. And Kayla can speak to a lot of the educational piece, but we watch our students as they're pursuing their education. We're focused on their educational mentoring and focus there, and then professional development, as well as we provide a last-in scholarship so that that financial burden can be alleviated just a little bit for our students while they're in school. And so really that's our inspiring factor, is watching our students be first-gen college students from all different backgrounds and languages and personal ethnic cultures, to be able to see them thrive and drive in their own environments and professional dreams.
Thanks so much, Kirsi, and thank you to all the panelists for sharing what inspires you. I feel like a common thread that I heard was exposure to different backgrounds and experiences, and how that really, and building personal relationships with others, and how that's really driven you to move into this space. So I want to pivot back to Kayla. And I want to ask, Kayla, if you can share how you came to be, a little more about how you came to be at One Refugee, and then specifically what happened that almost made this work come to a stop?
Sure. So to give kind of a better idea of what the work is, I'll start with that. So I had a lot of support from the International Rescue Committee to build this program, and what it is now and what it aspires to be is a space to support students from refugee backgrounds. We're currently working with high school students to address the need, the disparity that we have experienced here locally and globally for a long time, that refugees have unequal access to education, higher education. And so College Bound works to address the unique needs of refugees and those risk factors to help give them more equal access and better preparation for a college education. And the program is unique because it's different than larger national programs like TRIO or AVID, which are amazing programs that are built to serve larger general populations, low-income populations, but College Bound is built to serve the unique needs of students from refugee backgrounds. So we're more able to, we have better success in accomplishing our goals and giving more students access to college and better preparation for college. So we're expanding. Next year we'll be running out of Capitol High School, Centennial High School, Bora High School, and then we also run a Saturday model at Boise State actually each year to gather students from all different high schools. So the program, when it was just a couple years into implementation, was facing a lot of challenges funding-wise because of the Trump administration really cut our refugee numbers down. Kirsi, you can probably correct me if my numbers are wrong, but with the Obama administration, it was over 100,000 per year was what was allowed, but the Trump administration dropped it down in previous years to 10 to 15,000. Someone correct me if my numbers are incorrect. But a lot of people don't understand that refugee resettlement agencies get their funding largely from the government, and they get a certain amount of funding for each individual that they resettle through the refugee resettlement process. So when the numbers go down under whatever current administration we have, it really, really affects those organizations' ability to provide programming. So between the drastic cut, unprecedented cut, we've never seen refugee numbers so low as they were with the Trump administration. And so our agencies, not just International Rescue Committee, but World Relief, Agency for New Americans, all of the global resettlement organizations were facing serious budget cuts. And once you throw COVID on top of that, IRC cut its US programs really drastically. So what ended up happening, and appropriately so, is that locally here at our IRC Boise office, you have to cut it down to the most essential programming, which is when families arrive here, they need to learn English, they need to get a job, they need a house. And programs like College Bound that are more about holistic well-being and longer-term financial security, you know, those programs get cut. So yeah, we were told that we were losing funding, and the program was having great outcomes, and really IRC loved the mission and really supported it, but we were at risk of being cut. So gratefully, we had created this beautiful partnership previously with One Refugee. So we were able to create this partnership where the students that complete the College Bound program are automatically, and as long as they meet minimum GPA and SAT requirements, they're automatically enrolled in the scholarship program at One Refugee. So we already had this great partnership, and Raymond Burton, the executive director, I let him know, hey, I know you really believe in this program. We're doing great work. We're at risk at being cut. Are you interested in picking us up? And gratefully, he was really excited about that and took it to the board, and we were able to be incorporated into the One Refugee organization so that we can continue that. And it has really allowed us to grow and expand. So there was a big silver lining to an ugly cloud there.
Thank you, Kayla. And that sounds very much like you were an intrapreneur. So innovating and creating something within one organization. And when that had the unfortunate problem of being cut, you're able to take that and move it over to a similar organization. And that's, that is a very entrepreneurial skill to transition one business unit over to a new organization. And Whitney, your organization, less than 1 year old, really a startup, and you an entrepreneur. Can you tell us about that journey over the last year, your co-founders and your experience and any lessons learned for folks that may be wanting to start a startup nonprofit of their own?
Yeah, there's a lot. So one, I think all of us, our entire team has, I can say pretty confidently, just been drinking from a fire hose for 8 months every day, every week. Starting in a pandemic was tough, but we actually had a few things that are sort of unusual or are not as common when you have a startup where you build something that's really brand new. And so we came off of, we were created off of a really big event that was known, widespread. And so that gave us a large following and momentum that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And so our name is Inclusive Idaho. We formed our organization in a time when the entire nation was sort of seated and ready and listening about inclusion, which is super helpful. So we had a couple of things that really on our side just to be able to launch well with community support. which is really, really important, almost to me as important as fundraising. And so some of the challenges there, though, moving into a space after we did a really large in-person event and trying to take COVID really seriously, the type of organization that we are, our programming, our planned programming and events, we really want to be an organization that is face-to-face and with people, creating community, coalitions, and opportunities for folks to be together. And I know that's sort of the whole world right now, right? That is online. But when you're brand new and everything you do, all of the first things that you do pretty much are online. That's been a challenge, but I feel like Boise and Treasure Valley and even Idaho has shown up time and time and again to remind us that, like, even though we're sort of in this space that is not as comfortable, is not what we want it to be, that they're ready and that they're listening. But even in that, we've seen a lot of community partnerships happen. We have a large volunteer list. And so I think folks really just adapted with us. Folks were already adapting when we started, which I think was really, really huge. And fundraising wise, it's been a challenge. I'm a very face-to-face person, and I'm the executive director. So I see it as it is my duty. And I also take a large part of all of the money that we bring in. And I love sitting down with people. And as we know, with nonprofits, we ask for a small amount of money and large amount of money. So that's been a challenge too. But I talked yesterday at the Young Women in Leadership Conference with Boise State, and it was about starting something, creating community impact and advocacy through something that you're passionate about. And I think just the message that we've been able to portray, the consistency and what we believe and how we post, and we're really active on social media. But I kept relaying to the high schoolers that I spoke to yesterday that having a really clear message and letting folks know who you are and sort of what you stand for has been really, really huge. When you're starting something that's all online and digital, that has to be super, super clear, and you have to feel accessible. And so our team has been really, really adamant about that, from our personal Facebook pages to our Inclusive Idaho webpage and all of our social media, making sure that folks feel like they can reach out to us, talk to us, see who we are, know who we are, and ask us questions. So.
Well, and I'll say, Whitney, as a huge fan of yours, I mean, Inclusive Idaho, your social media is so on point. And I too attended I helped out with the Women in Leadership Conference, the Young Women in Leadership Conference yesterday. And to those on today's call who weren't there, it was full of very passionate young leaders who want to see inclusion and equity move forward within this state. I would say that was, I mean, a common thread throughout the entire day. And so with that kind of shifting to Kirsi, I'm wondering, with, One Refugee and your organization, what have you been able to accomplish with your students? And then how, on a second question to that, how can students get involved?
Yes, absolutely. So I would first say that, I guess one of the blessings of this year has actually been 2020 has enormously impacted our professional development growth for our students, and having to transition to virtual means, where it provided a larger net of creativity of how can we support our students in school while they're doing online classes, while they're trying to still navigate to their future careers. And so it's provided a lot of outlets of creativity. And so what we've seen happen, especially in kind of the DEI focus, we're in the professional development scene, we're really, really focused on helping our students build a network early on in college, because as we all know, networking is the way to landing your full-time role and building that in the future. And when you don't personally have a family network, or you have a lot of family members who are already working professionally around you, that's also something our students face, where they are building from scratch. And so we were really trying to help them early on. And so what we've instituted is a lot of professional mentoring. So we love engaging with individuals or companies, nonprofits, startups, small business, you name it, that want to engage with our students to let their employees connect and share about their story. So pre-COVID time, we often about once a month would take a small group of students and go into a company's office. And they'd invite us in and we would set up a speed networking session, and students would rotate and get to meet with different employees from different departments and see how you could actually take your degree to different areas in a field. And then we also did a lot of job shadowing, which is invaluable to be able to get firsthand experience of what does a social media marketer actually do in their day-to-day job, or what is this healthcare professional, what are they actually doing every day? And then we've also instituted a lot of informational interviews. And so that is something we have been able to pivot virtually, which has been such a success. And so we held a big thing last summer where we had a lot of our students engaging with professional mentors from different fields on a virtual call. And we did it again this fall. And so we love doing that on an individual basis when we have volunteers who reach out to us and want to engage that way, or a company or a startup or nonprofit wants a group of employees to engage with our students. Those are tremendous. And then I'd say another thing that we've seen is we have been able to receive a very generous grant that's provided us an opportunity to provide unpaid internship stipends. And so a big barrier in college is making sure you're able to land an internship, because that can be a huge step to getting a full-time role. And so for a lot of our students, unpaid internships are really hard because of family responsibilities and needing to work and continue to provide some financial support for their individual lives or their family's lives. And so with this grant, we've been able to go knock on doors to nonprofits and startups and say, would you like to have interns that you can't actually pay yourself, and be able to set up internship roles where our students can apply for these roles, and they're specifically earmarked for One Refugee college students. And then we provide the stipend on our end. So it's at no cost to the nonprofit or the startup or the small business. And we've seen this effectively with one startup that's based in Utah that actually has mainly Idaho students interning with them. And they just are about to have a product launch, and they had nothing starting off when their students came on board, and the students just jumped into the creative process with them, and they're getting ready to launch their first product now with our students having supported them. And at the same time, our students are able to get internship experience where maybe they might normally be in a pile of 55 resumes, and it's just hard to be seen. And we have a lot of students who go and apply for big name internships and they land them, and it's totally possible. But it's also really helpful to have an avenue where we know that it's a supportive environment where our students can get a really great internship experience and support on the other side of that. So that's also a success measure that we've seen that benefits the community and provides a very inclusive opportunity for our students to engage at a professional level. And so with students wanting to get involved with One Refugee, anyone who's interested in joining our program, we have an application that opens every year, and it's open right now. And our priority deadline is actually March 1st. So there's still a few days, but not a big deal if someone needs to send it in a little bit after. We're okay. So we open up an application every year. And once a student is admitted into our program, as long as they're maintaining requirements, they can stay like all of their years of school and of college. And so the application is really for new students or someone who had to leave college and come back. And so that's open. It's on our website. I can share all that information, but you'll just go through a screening. And so the things that we ask for in our application is a 1 to 2 page personal statement. We want to verify that you've applied for FAFSA, and showing that. We also require just an unofficial transcript so that we can see your GPA from high school or from college currently. And then just kind of background information verifying your refugee status. So if students came on a special immigrant visa or they're an asylee, that's also plausible for them. So it's open right now. Students can reach out to us at any time through the year though, and we'll always let them know when our application is going to be open. But we really we're building a lot in Idaho, and we're excited to keep the conversation going and heading that direction.
Thank you, Kirsi. Love how the students can get involved, and obviously, later on those students can work for some of the organizations, even organizations that may be on this call. And kind of pulling on that thread a little bit, with One Refugee, students come out, they can get to work. So that's a natural partnership for businesses. Whitney, we have a lot of business owners or freelancers or folks on this call who may be wondering locally how they could get involved or partner with Inclusive Idaho. Do you have examples of ways that you've partnered with businesses over the past year?
Oh yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So it's been really fun to do this. Also, obviously stressful, but one of the cool things, again, I'll say, is the amount of folks or businesses that have just reached out to us, which has been really neat. And some of those have provided grants or large donations. Right now, one of the programs that we are on the very cusp of launching is Inclusive Outdoors, and so that. Because we want our work to be all of Idaho eventually, we're located in Boise, but all of Idaho eventually. And Inclusive Outdoors is all about the outdoors is all of Idaho. And so some of the orgs that you'll see if you go to our website or just ask that we're partnering with for that are Boise Bicycle Project, Idaho Rivers United, the Wood Rivers Trails Coalition, the Wood River Land Trust. I'm not going to remember all the names, and the list is growing. And so for business partnerships, one of the things that we're looking at is how can we do our programming really well, but bring alongside other organizations, especially other nonprofits who are already either doing similar work or work that coincides really, really well with what we want to do. And so building access, education, experience, mentorship, but also building access for folks who look like me and other, the BIPOC community and the LGBTQ+ community and the refugee community and the outdoors should and requires a lot of other folks outside of ourselves. So that's really in programming is where we are seeing the most benefit to have those business partners. And it's also really cool when we receive grants or so Idaho Conservation Voters has provided us with grant money, and that's gone a long way in a lot of the other things that we're doing and being able to give back to the community as well in that way. So yeah.
Well, congratulations on almost launching Inclusive Outdoors. I know that you guys have something planned for this weekend, so good luck with that. But with that, kind of with what, organizations need and kind of a call to action for those who are on the call right now, I'm wondering if Kayla or Kirsi, if you can speak to what are things that your organization needs that people on this call might not know and you want to let them know.
I'll jump in there. To piggyback on what Kirsi has already shared, One Refugee always is in need of community partners that will take on our students as interns. And we also need that on the high school side as well. So our students from a refugee background have come from, of course, really hard places and have overcome a lot. And we find that many, if not most of them, are seeking out careers where they can help people. They put a high priority on giving back to their communities that have given so much to them. And but they have a bit of tunnel vision because they don't have exposure to a lot of different career options or professions. So a lot of my high school seniors just get stuck in this idea, okay, well, if I want a career to help people, then I need to be a nurse. If I want a career to make money, then so I can help my family, so I can give financially back to others, then I need a career in business, which is one way to give back. But there's, as we know, a million different careers where you can give back to your community. But there's just a lack of exposure. So what my students really need is mentors from different types of business owners from all different types of fields. So we haven't been able to do job shadowing because of COVID, but job shadowing is a really amazing opportunity for my students to get real life exposure to a career that they're curious about or have in mind. So I would love to, Trailhead has been a beautiful partner in this, but one of the projects I'd like to work on is getting a database together of local business owners, of local professionals in all different careers who are willing to at some point take on a student for job shadowing and possibly even extended mentorship through. There's a lot of amazing mentoring programs around here in Boise that we plug students into. So that's a big one. If you would be willing to take a student for an afternoon and teach them a little bit about your career, please reach out to me. And funding is huge. When you're working at a nonprofit and you really rely on the generosity of others, any sort of funding options that you know are available that we could apply for grants, that is huge to keep us alive.
Yeah, I think Kayla really shared a lot of the big pieces. And you've already heard me speak to the internship piece, and I love that Kayla helped kind of paint that picture. And really now, if I had my chart in front of us, you would see that our students' majors are across the board. So we're talking healthcare, public health, we're talking technology, computer science, engineering, we're talking international relations, social work, you name it. And so really, we love getting creative with the community and saying, what are your needs that aren't being filled? And where can we help you and support, where our students love to hop in and have that space to learn and to grow personally. And so just as Kayla was mentioning, another big piece is professional mentoring for the college students as well. And that's something where we've had a pretty big pool in Utah. And so we've been working with global talent here and trying to merge that a little bit into Idaho. And so whether you or others that you know are just interested, these can be one-time calls. Like right now, virtually, we've done kind of like a one-time informational interview, or if you want to speak with a student kind of once a month through over a semester, we leave it really open. And so we're super, super excited to find those engagement opportunities because it is so rewarding for our students to talk to someone who's actually in the field and get an idea of what this actually looks like when you graduate. And to get some new ideas about how they can maybe use their major in a different way than they're expecting. And so those are really invaluable. And then, of course, kind of what Kayla was just speaking, we always welcome donations of any kind. We do make it possible that if someone wants to specifically like sponsor one student, that's perfectly doable. And so we do have a few donors who focus and earmark that funding for like one specific student or housing. We support our students in housing. So if you have connections or opportunities to housing, apartments or amenities and wanting to donate there, we have a few private donors who donate towards housing support for our students as well. So and emotional and mental well-being, that's another thing. We do pay for our students to receive up to 10 sessions of counseling and therapy if they're in a need and in a trauma experience. And so if that's something you're passionate about, we love to talk in that space as well and have webinars with different therapists to talk with students. And we love speaking to that space as well.
Whitney, is there anything for your organization that comes to mind that maybe a need or something that people wouldn't expect that you all could be in need of?
We're a startup, so we're in need of a lot. But and as much as I am really encouraged by our fundraising, donations are always huge for us, really important for us. And I'll be really transparent right now and say that I don't get paid for any of the work that I'm doing with Inclusive Idaho, and I haven't been paid a single dime. And that's purposeful because we want our grants and our donations to go to programming right now over salary. And that's not true for our whole team, but it's a decision I made as executive director. And it won't always stay that way, but we want our organization to be here for the long haul. And that means making some sacrifice. In the beginning, I also will just say that I think I saw some questions in the chat, but I think just leaning in. So not even just leaning into Inclusive Idaho and the work that we're doing, but for our community, for small businesses, large businesses, and individuals to just take another second or a moment to lean into diversity, equity, inclusion work, and take the time to listen. And really look at ways that they can implement or at least start the process of learning or educating themselves on things that they can do differently in their personal lives. And that makes that makes our work just a tinge easier. And I think that's just super important for the community. But I also will just say that I'd love to see other organizations, other nonprofits look around outside of their major goals and sort of what they do. This is what we do. And an example that I give for that is Inclusive Idaho received a $10,000 grant in December, and we gave all $10,000 of it away. As a startup nonprofit, that's not something that you see often. And it's not to brag, it's just because we understood that we were at the end of a year of a pandemic and that our community desperately needed funds more than they needed more of our programming or another event to come to or whatever it might be. But that if we could provide the funding so we just gave COVID-19 relief, holiday relief to keep their lights on. And a lot of that money went to underserved communities, went to LGBTQ plus members in our community, and went to the BIPOC community and the refugee community as well. And so I think if your mission is serving those folks, it goes beyond what you have on your website, what you have, what you do, what you raise money for, and actually meeting those people where they're at and what they need in the day in and the day out.
That's amazing. And it really seems like Inclusive Idaho's walking the walk and setting an example for others. And you talked about the questions in the chat, and I would like to throw it back to you and just ask this question of, is Idaho worthy of its reputation for not being inclusive? Would you be willing to speak to your own organization, or your own experience? And obviously, I guess I would preface this with, you started an organization called Inclusive Idaho. So there is a problem inherent in the fact that that organization had to be started because you saw a larger amount of work to be done. So I think the answer is somewhat implied, but maybe just how you see it in your work, and even if you're willing to speak to it in your own experience.
Yeah, I'm absolutely willing. So I would say yes, Idaho is worthy of its reputation of not being inclusive. And that's a really tough answer to just lay it out there really blanketly. But it doesn't mean that there aren't really great things going on in organizations and folks who really want to be inclusive. But our organization and so many other organizations exist in Idaho because we can be, and we're attempting to be more inclusive. And so I think our organization is definitely necessary. But I think from personal experience, I've spent a lot of my life in majority white spaces, or even in majority spaces where I'm the only, so either the only woman or especially the only Black woman. And that's happening most often in almost every space. The current space we're in, I can't see everybody's photos or nor do I know everyone's race, but it's more often happening than not. And so as someone who's constantly entering spaces where I'm the one or the only, I continually and will probably continue to experience uncomfortable moments and words that aren't always from a place of discrimination, but just a lack of knowledge. And so the long answer to that is Idaho is worthy of its reputation of not being inclusive, but I think we are, and we have been capable of so much more. And I think that's the reason why I always go back to the vigil. I think that's the reason why the vigil was such a newsworthy event, is because it was a physical, visible response of Idahoans showing up to mourn and to stand with Black Idahoans for Black lives. And I think it surprised people to see that many people in Idaho actually take a stance so physical and visible. So I think, yes, it's easy to talk about where we are definitely going wrong. But I think when you see organizations like One Refugee and many others, Janus Economic Opportunity is another organization that I love, the Idaho Coalition, I can keep naming, but there are folks here that are doing the work, and it's a marathon. This is 20 years of work minimum that we have ahead of us, and we have to think about it that way instead of trying to create perfect inclusion, perfect equity, and perfect diversity in single conversations.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And, the fact that you point out it's a marathon. Most startups are not built for marathon type work. It's more of a sprint. But I think that you're right. This type of work, this, work in social change is definitely a long game, and it's not something that happens overnight. Kayla, Kirsty, would you be willing to speak to any observations you may have had related to how your students exist in Idaho and some of the challenges, or even in Utah for that matter, Kirsty? Any challenges that they may face as refugees in their communities?
I get lots of different perspectives from my students. Some they all experience racism here in Idaho. Some recognize it, some do not. But what my students have told me is that attending predominantly white institutions, whether that's high school or college, that they do not feel like they can speak up in class. Many are saying they don't raise their hand, and that's very directly related to their skin color and feeling like they don't belong in a space, and that they are treated differently by students and professors. It's a conversation that really needs to be had, and it's a really hard conversation to have. But yeah, if you asked my students whether Idaho is inclusive or not, I think you would get a pretty mixed bag of answers. It's pretty complicated.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of like specific experiences that I could share. So I've been with One Refugee for about 2 years, and so it's been really interesting because I felt like when I first came on, we were already trying to do a lot of like diversity and inclusion pieces without calling them diversity and inclusion pieces. Just like kind of in our engagement with supporting students and helping students feel like supported and connected in their workplaces and feeling like they were, in class. Like, do you have access to the tutors and resources that you need? Like, what are you missing to help you be the best you can be? And so it's been interesting this last year where I know in Idaho, the conversation has picked up a lot, and as well as in Utah, and there's a lot more spaces wanting to talk. And so I've watched some really cool experiences where I've watched our students who are they're ready to go. Like, they're ready to jump into their internship or their job, and they're excited. But I remember having a conversation with one student. Her name is Gladys, and she was previously a principal in Kenya. And she is a mom of 3 adorable boys, and she's just finishing up her degree in special education at the U. But she was starting her internship this last fall in teaching in a special ed class. And I remember talking to her about 3 weeks in, and she said, Kirsty, when I got to the school, I was so terrified because there was no one else that looked like me, and I didn't know how this was going to go. And so then she kept talking to me, and she told me, she's like, but it totally changed my view because everyone has been so kind to me. And so many people are reaching out to me and asking me how I'm doing and what do I need. And she's like, and I love it now. She's like, I love where I work. The job is hard, but it's so great. And so we do hear a lot of those experiences where students haven't seen necessarily or haven't envisioned what support might actually look like once they're in a role, whether that's like racially they look different, or sometimes it's the language barrier too, that students are really concerned about their accent, and they're like, because I have an accent, I'm going to be seen differently, or have my voice won't be as much as it needed to be. And something cool that we've seen recently is we just started, a little plug, we have a podcast coming out in about a couple weeks, but we just took 7 students and let them share their stories and ask them questions about their experiences. And it was so powerful to watch each of them share, and just their confidence was just growing in our conversations and interviews. And I think it's just the smallest things that I've seen, the tiniest pieces where a student feels empowered in a role, or they love their internship and they forget they were even part of a refugee cohort, because that doesn't even matter anymore. And that's something as a team we discuss a lot, that our students don't necessarily always see themselves as refugees anymore, that they are a University of Utah college student, or they are a Boise State University college student. And that's a really cool space to be in, to see that empowerment and growth in our students, and also honing to their personal cultures and their personal family needs. And I think that that's a really beautiful blend when that can exist together. And so we're just enjoying the journey of being able to see that and continue to grow and learn from them.
Nice. And I want to kind of finish out with, to build inclusion, to point on a lot of things that all 3 of you said, is really leaning into what's happening and learning and educating yourself. And I want to end with one of TM's first questions of what can the business community do to better support your work and this work. And I think for me, coming from Blue Sky, this is not, it's leaning in, also business is leaning into the work that's happening outside of their business walls. Because in order for Idaho to be inclusive, we need them to feel included. We need everyone to feel included in the community, and that's the work that this group is doing. So I'd like to just allow each of you to have some closing thoughts of how the business community can help you in your mission. Whitney, since you're off mute, you want to start?
Yeah, I will try to be brief. Again, I will say that I think the biggest thing that the business community can do in all of Idaho is lean in, be brave enough. If you don't know anything, if you feel like you're at the bottom level, but start somewhere when it comes to inclusion in your space. And the business community leaning in our state, in our communities, is, to me, going to be one of the single greatest factors in creating a more inclusive Idaho.
Thanks, Whitney. Kayla or Kirsi, any final thoughts on?
I'll just say, as with any nonprofit, funding is always a challenge. So we are really, really creative in the way we go about our work. And it has been really beneficial, actually, to have that creativity, because we depend on some really strong and amazing partnerships that we have here in Boise. And we're always looking to build and grow those partnerships. Right now, the workshops that we're running right now, we were at risk of not being able to run them at all because of COVID and some of the restrictions that Boise State has. And Trailhead has sponsored us this spring and is making the program possible by offering us this space to run our workshops. We partner with Step Ahead Idaho that does all of our students' college admissions applications and financial aid applications with their funding and grants. And Boise State, College of Western Idaho, they are doing amazing work and building amazing programs to support these students. So our work is not done in a vacuum, and we're very, very grateful for those partnerships and couldn't work without it. So if you're interested in getting involved, please reach out. We're always looking to partner.
Yes, and I would say I totally reiterate what Whitney has shared in leaning in. I think it's the most powerful tool. And Kayla's mention of how we can't do this on our own. And that I love watching how our students are like, well, I had this mentor here and this mentor here and this mentor here, and that's what helped me get to where I am. And I think that's so true of, like, it's beautiful as a community that we can all support. And I would say in my realm that kudos to Whitney's comment of leaning in, but you can be creative in how you want to lean in that. I think a lot of people don't think about professional development as a way, with like college students, is a way of meaning of like support. And that maybe if you've never ever worked with a refugee, someone of a refugee background, and you're not sure how to navigate that, feel free to reach out, and we love to have creative conversations and help you figure out where you're most interested in, where you would like to engage, as our students are so happy and willing to connect and build those partnerships themselves. So anything, any creativity, we are always open to and enjoy engaging.
Thank you, Kirsi, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time and just say thank you for joining us. To Kirsi and Kayla and Whitney, greatly appreciate your willingness to share your organization's work and your own experiences. We will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone that attended this, and we'll circle back to you all if you have information that we can share with the group. And thank you, Whitney, for posting an answer to Tressa's question in the chat as well. And these are big topics, and we only had an hour together, but I'll just speak for myself. It was hugely educational to me and hopefully to our audience. And yeah, we just encourage everyone to reach out and get involved with these organizations and others that are doing very important work in our community. And yeah, thank you again. And until next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.